After 47 years, the Denver Nuggets can finally call themselves NBA champions.
The job is done. We can go home now. It was a long journey. I think we deserve it.
And the Golden State Warriors, they dispatch of Jokic and the Nuggets.
But what's being exposed is Jokic to a large degree. He's having no impact whatsoever on this game.
And Murray's down and hurt. Oh, my goodness.
His first thought was, man, are you guys going to trade me?
It's over. Denver's chances of getting to the finals are ruined.
Nikola Jokic, let me be clear here, is a great player, but he has been elevated to a place he has no business being.
Jokic just gets it off in time. It's up. Oh, it's good. Of course it goes in. Stolen by Murray. One man to beat. Murray goes up, throws it down, and the foul.
Nikola doesn't get respect. The Nuggets don't get respect. I don't get respect.
Throws it down.
Who cares, man?
If I said to you, Nikola Jokic is the best basketball player in the world, what would you say?
I'd say, duh. Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets win it all.
In the mid-2010s, three-point shooting took over the NBA. In an instant, the most valuable players on a team were ones that could shoot. The superstars and champions of the league were almost universally guards and wings. The concept of building around a center was laughed at, with the idea of doing so appearing to be a foreign concept of the past. That's why once it became clear the Denver Nuggets were building around center Nikola Jokic, many fans raised an eyebrow. It was going against the grain, challenging the norms of the league that had been put in place. But everything about the Denver Nuggets 2023 championship roster was doubted and underrated. From the superstar that made it all possible, to the rookie sitting at the end of the bench, many of these players had experiences with being overlooked, whether it was by other teams, basketball fans, or the NBA media. That's what makes their championship so sweet. It may not have been the flashiest names, but their roster had fantastic depth, strong coaching, star power, and the right winning mentality. The Nuggets weren't always like this though. Once, they were an irrelevant franchise, with talks to even relocate them away from Denver. Now, they're perhaps the most feared team in the league, with an iconic championship ring under their belt. How did they overcome the obstacles thrown at them, and what were the moves that ultimately led them to the promised land? For a while, when thinking of the number 15 in Nuggets history, it wasn't Nikola Jokic who came to mind, but Carmelo Anthony. Melo was drafted to a struggling Nuggets franchise in 2003, and helped them get as far as the Western Conference Finals in 2009. Unfortunately, what should have been an era remembered for winning soon deteriorated into one filled with drama. Melo requested a trade out from Denver in the summer of 2010. He wanted to build off the conference finals team of the past. Instead, Melo felt like Denver was looking towards rebuilding, and he wanted none of it. The Nuggets eventually granted his wish, trading him a few months later in February of 2011. For the years that followed this, the Nuggets could never find someone to replace Melo's superstar shoes. They traded for Andre Iguodala in 2012, but after one disappointing playoff exit, he bounced to the team that beat them. They tried to put all their apples into the basket of Danilo Gallinari and Ty Lawson, but injuries killed that idea quickly. What was left from Melo's fallout and Iguodala's departure was a team that was in the worst spot imaginable, too good to get a high pick, and too bad to get anywhere in the playoffs. It was NBA purgatory, and the Nuggets were smack dab in the middle of it. Luckily for Denver, their phenomenal 2014 draft quickly sent them from a team in nowhere land to a team with a purpose. The Nuggets left this draft with Jusuf Nurkic, Gary Harris, and Nikola Jokic. Nurkic and Harris were great picks who would turn into solid starters, but no one remembers the 2014 draft for these two. This class is known as the Nikola Jokic class, because with the 41st pick, Denver changed their fortunes forever. They drafted Joker, and it all transpired infamously during a Taco Bell commercial. At the time, he was seen as just another overseas big man. There were tons of questions about his physical intangibles and appearance, which made him slide down the draft. As we all know though, Jokic ended up making his critics look silly.
Jokic with the block shot, his second tonight. Oh, what a pass by Jokic. Jokic put it out.
But the Nuggets were not aware of the prize they had gotten just yet. For now, they would be in an awkward half-rebuilding phase that took place during the 2014-15 season. They won just 30 games, the lowest win total they'd get for the foreseeable future. The highest pick they ever received in a draft of the Nikola Jokic era was 7th, which made their rise to a contender all the more impressive. Denver spent a considerable amount of energy on the development aspect of their roster, and it paid off. Not everyone drafted to the team had a success story though. In the 2015 draft with the 7th pick, they chose point guard Emmanuel Mudiay. Mudiay had a promising rookie season, but never developed past the role player stage. He was traded roughly 3 seasons into his career. The real catch during the summer of 2015 was the hiring of a key figure that would stick around for years to come, Michael Malone. Malone had been fired by the Sacramento Kings after just a season and a half. But what hadn't been grasped back then was that it wasn't Malone's fault that he couldn't save the Kings franchise. No one could. Malone brought stability and leadership to an organization that needed it, and became one of the league's longest tenured coaches. The 2015-16 season featured the introduction of 2 rookies for Denver, the aforementioned Mudiay, and the then obscure Nikola Jokic. Jokic had played overseas during the 2014-15 season, and had done well for himself, winning the Adriatic League MVP, a sign of things to come. Jokic showed flashes of greatness in his rookie campaign, finishing 3rd in the Rookie of the Year voting. Quickly, he went from looking like a 2K auto-generated player on the floor, to one fans recognized as having elite potential. Jokic made a handful of mind-blowing passes, with his playmaking arising as his best trait. A center being a great playmaker was unheard of, and the fact that Jokic had such a feel for the game at just 20 years old was astonishing. But if you asked most non-Nuggets fans during this time who Jokic was, they'd look at you like you had 3 heads. He wasn't even a consistent starter on his squad, with many valuing his teammate Jusuf Nurkic over him. At the end of it all, Denver finished with 33 wins in the 2015-16 season. Thanks to the Carmelo Anthony trade of the past, the Nuggets had rights to swap with the New York Knicks in the draft. The 7th pick was once again thrown their way as a result, and this time, they didn't make a mistake. They chose a player who would become irreplaceable to the franchise, Jamal Murray. Murray was viewed as a strong scorer and shooter at the University of Kentucky, but his playmaking was seen as a huge question mark. Was he a true point guard? Many doubted so. Defensively, he was called a traffic cone. Like Jokic, there were questions about if he could survive the physicality of NBA defenses. But Denver was never afraid to take risks. The 2016-17 season for the Nuggets was when they first started turning some heads across the league. Denver's rise to the top wasn't a massive jump that occurred in one season. Rather, it was a slow and steady race to the finish line. For rookie Jamal Murray though, his race started with a crash. He opened up his NBA career missing his first 17 shots, leaving many in Denver scratching their head. Did they just draft another bust? Instead of Murray letting this shake his confidence, he put in even more work on his game. After averaging 1 point per game in the first 4 games, he turned it around, averaging 13 points on 50% three-point shooting in the next 10 games. Murray turned his critics into believers, finishing with a modest 10 points per game on the season. Jokic was stellar as well, bumping his scoring to 17 a game, with 10 boards, and most importantly, 5 dimes. The big fella could pass, and was starting to build a large following of fans who admired his unorthodox style of play. The Nuggets saw his potential, and decided to make Jokic the permanent starter on December 15, 2016 over Jusuf Nurkic. Not too long after, Nurkic was traded to Portland, as he had requested out. This was when the Nikola Jokic era officially began in Denver. It didn't take long for the wins to start piling in. After starting out the season 14-23, they finished going 26-19, ending with 40 wins total. One would initially think that this would land them a playoff appearance, but they fell just 1 game shy of achieving that goal. All in all, the Nuggets figured out their team's identity heading into the future. It was time to continue building, and they did just that in the summer of 2017. What few fans know is that the Nuggets actually drafted future star player Donovan Mitchell 13th overall in the 2017 draft, but traded him to the Jazz for Trey Lyles and Tyler Lydon. They got absolutely fleeced in this trade, and it could have been a mistake that set their team back years. The Nuggets, however, were different, and continued moving forward. In free agency, they signed Paul Millsap, re-signed Mason Plumlee, who was received in the Nurkic deal, and brought in Monte Morris and Torrey Craig on two-way contracts. All of these were solid additions, more specifically Morris and Craig, who turned into valuable rotation pieces out of nowhere for this squad. Denver had a nose for finding scrappy talent that had been given up on by the league, and much of their vaunted depth came from their elite scouting. While the Nuggets did indeed take a leap in the 2017-18 season, the long sought-after goal of the playoffs fell just out of grasp. The team won 46 games, in large part to yet another stellar season by Joker. He was now ranked among the star-studded names of big men like Anthony Davis or Joel Embiid. Yup, the debates between these two that would plague NBA media started right around here in the 2017-18 season. Jamal Murray also saw a massive jump in his points per game, going from a measly 10 to 17. His efficiency drastically increased. He went from 33% from downtown to 37%. The complementary pieces also started to shine bright. Will Barton, Wilson Chandler, and Gary Harris were all players integral to the team's success. But this season is only remembered for one thing by Nuggets fans: how it ended. The last game of the season was between the Denver Nuggets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. The winner made the playoffs. It was the original play-in game. All the stakes were at their highest, and the Nuggets lost in overtime. Jokic and Murray tried their best, but Jimmy Butler and Karl Anthony Towns outplayed them. All the great championship teams face adversity before rising to the top, and this was just another example. But this loss wouldn't just fuel the Nuggets, it would make them deeply think. The front office soon decided that it would turn their attention away from trying to get role players and towards chasing stars. In the 2018 draft, they held the 14th pick and selected Michael Porter Jr. from the University of Missouri. To call this a gamble of a pick would be an understatement. Porter Jr. had been smeared with back injuries throughout his high school and college seasons, putting his playing career in jeopardy, but risk-taking was in the Nuggets' blood. They saw his flawless offensive game when he was healthy, and felt it justified this selection. He wouldn't play his rookie season due to a prior back injury, but this pick was an investment in the future. He would go on to be the prized third star. Fast forward 1 year. The Nuggets went from missing the playoffs to advancing all the way to the second round. But why? Their roster wasn't all that different from the previous year. So what was the change? In reality, the change came from within. In the summer of 2018, extensions were handed to Nikola Jokic, Will Barton, Monte Morris, and Torrey Craig. All of these players would take leaps in their game, with the most significant being none other than Jokic himself. Finally, Jokic, the man with the keys to the franchise, was an all-star, averaging 20 points per game with 7 dimes and 11 boards. He had a breakout season, transforming into one of the best 15 players in the league. Nuggets fans had to pinch themselves every time he was on the floor. To go from an unknown 41st pick to this was incredible, and he was still just 23 years old. Jamal Murray had also established himself as the undisputed sidekick to Joker, dazzling spectators on a nightly basis with an 18 points per game scoring average. Surrounding these two was ridiculous depth. It was pick your poison. Do you want sharpshooting? Then pick Gary Harris. How about ball handling? Then Monte Morris. An offensive punch? Malik Beasley. This well-constructed roster cruised to 54 wins in the second seed. They advanced past the Spurs in 7 in round 1, and all the way to an extremely close second-round loss to the Portland Trailblazers. In this series, both these squads went tooth and nail against one another, with 3 out of the 7 games being decided by 5 or less points. The most heartbreaking L of the Nikola Jokic Nuggets era to that point came in Game 7 though, where the Blazers just barely survived and grabbed the W. CJ McCollum of Portland had 37 points, decimating the Nuggets defense with his ridiculous jump shooting. Looking at the Nuggets box score for this game makes you cringe. Jamal Murray especially struggled in this key game, shooting just 4 of 18 from the field. Paul Millsap also shot just 3 of 13, while Jokic was 11 of 26 from the floor. It was a missed opportunity unlike anything else. A Western Conference Finals appearance was on the line, and the Nuggets had failed to step up when needed. A long summer was ahead of them, and they decided to stack up on even more depth. The versatile and athletic Jeremy Grant was the main piece acquired in July 2019 for a first-rounder. Outside of this though, the Nuggets were once again quiet in terms of trade and free agency talk, but they didn't need anything else. Denver had finally gotten a taste of the bitterness that comes with playoff defeat, and they wanted revenge. What followed this L was their greatest playoff run in a decade. For the Denver Nuggets franchise back in 2020, achieving playoff success was about as infrequent as seeing Ben Simmons make a three-pointer. It didn't happen often. Their 2009 run to the conference finals with Carmelo Anthony was immortalized, simply because it had been a whole 24 years since their last time making it there. In 2020, it had been a torturous 11 years since Denver had made the conference finals. But finally, in the most abnormal environment imaginable, they triumphed over all the doubters and made it there. Their run featured two 3-1 comebacks, the first team to ever overcome that deficit twice in one postseason. In the regular season, Denver earned the third seed with a strong 46 wins in 73 games. Michael Porter Jr. made his long-awaited introduction to the team, playing 55 games and averaging 9 points. He showed flashes, shooting 42% from downtown, and having a surprisingly polished offensive game for a rookie. On the other hand, Jamal Murray was highly regarded as a top-tier combo guard, though he didn't get the same recognition as his partner in crime, Jokic, who had now been vaguely mentioned in MVP conversations. Murray had 0 All-Star appearances to this point. Momentum and frustration was building on Jamal's end. How could a near 20 points per game scorer on one of the best teams in the West not get more recognition from the media and fans? Murray soon realized the best way to prove himself was to perform when the lights shine brightest. The playoffs, in which he dominated. The Denver Nuggets had an all-time playoff run in the 2020 postseason that took place in the bubble. In round 1, they overcame a 3-1 deficit to the Utah Jazz. They initially fell down 3-1 in large part due to the ridiculous performances of the Jazz's Donovan Mitchell. Mitchell had 2 50-point bombs in the first 4 games, looking like an unstoppable monster. He pushed Denver all the way to the ropes, hitting them with a lethal punch in Game 4, dropping 51 points and going up 3-1. At this point, many believed that the Nuggets season was dead in the water. Then, Jamal Murray happened. In the next 2 games, Murray dazzled, scoring 42 and 50 points in Games 5 and 6. Every time the Jazz looked like they were clawing their way back into it, Murray hit them with a dagger to the chest. In Game 7, the main performer for Denver switched from number 27 to number 15. Joker had an incredible game, outdueling the opposing defensive menace Rudy Gobert. Jokic scored an efficient 30 points with 14 boards, including a plethora of clutch buckets down the stretch. Denver had survived, completing the 3-1 comeback. Both Murray and Jokic had played stellar ball, and this comeback was not only impressive, but reflected quite well on their mentalities. Instead of giving up when the going got tough, the Nuggets stayed focused and bounced back. The heavily favored LA Clippers were their next opponent, and like Utah, they jumped ahead early on, also taking a 3-1 lead. Why did Denver like taking the tough road and making it so hard for themselves? Who knows, but early on, they seemed like they were once again down and defeated. In Game 5 through 3 quarters, the LA Clippers climbed ahead by as much as 13. Kawhi Leonard was looking like a well-oiled machine, while Jokic and Murray looked gassed. This could have been it for the Nuggets. It would have gone down as yet another forgettable postseason exit. But something changed once the clock struck the 4th quarter. The Nuggets flipped a switch, while the Clippers fell into a pit of misery. Jokic and Murray combined for 20 points in the 4th, outlasting the Clippers and overcoming the double-digit deficit. This win rattled the Clippers to their core, because the next 2 games were comfortable blowouts in Denver's favor. Murray and Jokic continued to dominate, with Jokic dropping 34 in Game 6, while Murray scored 40 in Game 7. These two had officially arrived, emerging into an unstoppable duo on one of the biggest stages in basketball. This was the Denver Nuggets coming out party. They had just rallied back from a 3-1 lead again, stunning the LA Clippers. But this incredible high soon turned to a discouraging low, as the Los Angeles Lakers took care of Denver in 5 in the Western Conference Finals. It was a close series, but ultimately, the eventual champion Lakers out-talented Denver with their star power. It was a disappointing ending, but all in all, the Nuggets had a lot to be proud of with this run. These playoffs put Denver on the map. The team may have failed to win it all in 2020, but 2021 looked like a promising year to finish the job. What could go wrong? At first, everything went perfectly for the Nuggets in the 2020-21 season. Nikola Jokic took his game from great to incredible, transforming into a legit MVP candidate. Once he took control of the #1 spot in March of 2021, he never let go, cruising to his first ever MVP award in a landslide voting. Jokic averaged 26 points, 11 rebounds, and 8 dimes a game. Not only was he widely considered the best center in the world, but many had started wondering if he was the best player in the league. Michael Porter Jr. continued to build on his rookie campaign, exploding into a 19 points per game scorer at the age of just 22. He shot 44% from downtown, and seemed to have slain his back injury demons of the past. The Nuggets also did some roster building, fleecing the Orlando Magic in a deal to acquire Aaron Gordon on March 25th, 2021. With the departure of Jeremy Grant in the offseason, AG was a fantastic replacement. Gordon would soon develop into a perfect piece on Denver's championship core. Post All-Star break, the Nuggets got hot, going on an 8-game winning streak. Everything was looking up for them. This would be the year they broke through into champions. Unfortunately, the Nuggets would soon find out that nothing is guaranteed in sports. On April 12, 2021, Jamal Murray tore his ACL on a drive to the basket. In just one play, the Denver Nuggets' future changed forever. Not only did this injury put the Nuggets out of contention for the current season, but it would also negatively impact the ensuing season after that. In the blink of an eye, Denver's championship hopes had been completely crushed. Panic rose into the air. What if Jamal Murray would never be the same following this injury? What if Nikola Jokic would grow frustrated with his lack of help and leave? What if this was the beginning of the end? Jokic was able to keep his squad afloat and lead them all the way to the second round, but they were rocked by the Phoenix Suns in a sweep. The MVP may have been a nice consolation prize, but now, the future of the Nikola Jokic era was put into question. The 2021-22 season for Denver not only saw Jamal Murray sit out, but Michael Porter Jr. too. He got bit with the injury bug to his back just 9 games in, ending his season before it truly began. The second and third options for Denver had been erased in an instant, leaving Jokic all by himself. To many onlookers, this would be a frustrating season for the Nuggets, but in actuality, this was when Jokic truly established himself as the franchise's savior. He put the team on his back, became a true leader, and carried them. Denver won 48 games, surpassing the expectations placed on them, while Nikola Jokic had his best season yet. It cannot be downplayed how bad this Nuggets roster was outside of Jokic this season. The team went 2-6 without him, and got destroyed by opposing teams when he went to the bench. Many superstars in Jokic's position would have shrugged their shoulders and given up, but Joker was different. He proved how committed he was to the city of Denver in this season, putting up ridiculous numbers and getting wins. He was rewarded for his efforts with his second MVP, but not every fun story ends with success. The Nuggets were destroyed by the Warriors in round 1 of the 2022 playoffs, further highlighting how limited the team was without their stars. It was a depressing series. Jokic got ejected in Game 2 and got waved off the floor by Draymond Green. In Game 3, he was stripped by Green to all but end the Nuggets season. In Game 5, Steph Curry put them to sleep. The agony of defeat had struck them once again. The Nuggets front office looked themselves in the mirror and knew that they couldn't continue to let down their superstar. They signed him to a 5-year max extension in the summer of 2022 and immediately went to work. First up was the draft, in which the Nuggets held the 21st pick. Having a selection this late into a draft class is usually a toss-up, but the Nuggets picked a player who would directly help their championship run. Christian Braun, a slashing defender out of the University of Kansas, was chosen, who would shockingly evolve into his best self during the 2023 finals. The offseason for Denver outside of this featured 2 moves that would prove to be extremely valuable. First, they made a fantastic signing, bringing in Bruce Brown. Brown had showed flashes of being a solid role player in Brooklyn, but he ultimately failed to put it together. The 3-and-D wing was searching for a place to establish his name in the league, signing a short-term 2-year deal with a player option. In the trade world, Denver gave up 2 pieces who had stuck with the squad since nearly the beginning. Monte Morris and Will Barton were sent to Washington in exchange for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a former champion with the Lakers. KCP, like Brown, was trying to remind the league who he was after having a quiet, forgettable stint as a Wizard. It was yet another great move. KCP would be a key contributor to the team. These two additions, along with the health of their other stars, made Denver an incredibly constructed team. But if you looked at any major sports media publication, Denver was seen as an outsider in terms of championship talk. So what clicked? How did they defeat their skeptics and win the 2023 championship? The reality is that anyone who was surprised at Denver's postseason success hadn't been paying attention to them in the regular season. They won 53 games, the 5th most by any Nuggets team ever, and had the West on lock early on. From late December onwards, they stood at the number 1 seed with no interference for the rest of the season. Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. recovered well from their injuries, still remaining the offensive force they were known for in the past. Key role players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Bruce Brown, and Aaron Gordon also stepped up, providing superb two-way shooting and defense. Nikola Jokic did Joker things as always, averaging a near triple-double and finishing second in MVP voting. Many say he deserved his 3rd straight, but if you ask Jokic himself, he couldn't care less. His focus and the team's focus was on capturing the Nuggets' first championship in franchise history, and they did just that, in such an effortless manner that it surprised even their biggest supporters. Before the 2023 playoffs tipped off, NBA analysts seemed to be sold on any other team but the Nuggets. They picked the Sixers, Celtics, Bucks, or Suns to win, with many favoring Giannis or Embiid as the players that would show up in the playoffs, not Jokic. But if there's any feeling that Denver had become comfortable with over the years, it was being underrated by their peers. Whether it was their main Taco Bell drafted superstar in Jokic, or their second option in Murray, who had been hit with one of the worst injuries in the NBA only to bounce back, or their 3rd star in MPJ, who would overcome his basketball career being put in jeopardy due to back injuries. All of these doubts about their team were nothing new, but by the end, when they took care of business, all of the uncertainty had evaporated. And not only did they win, but they ate the other teams for breakfast. In round 1, they took care of the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5. Immediately, Jamal Murray made his presence known in these playoffs, averaging 27 points per game on 60% true shooting. Playoff Murray was a thing, and he rose to the occasion just like he did back in the bubble. Jokic owned multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year winner Rudy Gobert as well, casually averaging 26, 12, and 9. Round 2 was the most hard-fought series the Nuggets played in their championship run, and they met the hungry Phoenix Suns. The Suns had just put together an intimidating Big Two in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, with many outright predicting Phoenix to knock off the Nuggets. Despite Book and KD averaging 30 each, Jokic's 34-point triple-double stat line in this series was too much for them to handle. The Nuggets stomped on the Suns, beating them in 6, with each W coming in a decisive manner. At this point, Nikola Jokic had established himself as a flawless playoff performer. Unlike other stars, he had always risen to the occasion in his career, and never choked when his team needed him. With the series tied at 2, the Nuggets destroyed Phoenix in games 5 and 6, clinching the series victory. They had barely broken a sweat, beating the hyped-up Suns in spectacular fashion. The Denver Nuggets had made it to the conference finals once again. Ironically enough, like in 2020, they'd be playing the Los Angeles Lakers. This time, they got the last laugh, in a clean sweep. Anthony Davis and LeBron James were outplayed by Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, but Denver's depth and three-point shooting from the whole team guided them to the finish line. Denver had 5 players that shot above 40% from downtown in this series, led by Joker's 47% three-point shooting. It was an astonishing level of play from the MVP and his supporting crew. The Nuggets took care of LA in 4, banishing them to Cancun, and getting their revenge for the bubble nightmares of the past. They earned their first finals appearance ever as a franchise, in a dominant 12-3 stretch over the 3 rounds in the West. By this point, all of the critics of Denver had gone quiet, as the inevitable was starting to become clear. They were that damn good. This strong play would continue into the finals, where the Nuggets, to few surprise, would dismantle the 8th-seeded Miami Heat in 5. It was a finals that was criticized by casual fans for being too boring because of how perfectly Denver executed their game plan. 3 out of the 4 wins for the Nuggets were stress-free, while the one loss in Game 2 was a close battle that came down to a Jamal Murray missed 3 at the horn. Fans had soon come to find out that the Nuggets were simply just better than every other team in the league. Their offense flowed more smooth and efficiently than any other squad. They had more weapons, and their best player was unconscious. In games 1, 3, and 4, The Nuggets simply out-talented Miami, often building a sizable double-digit lead and refusing to let go of it. What made this squad so special was how every game, a different guy stepped it up. In Game 3, it was the rookie Christian Braun out of all people who played well. He scored 15 points on 7 of 8 shooting, tearing the Heat's defense apart with his slashing. In Game 4, Bruce Brown, an off-the-bench man, scored 21 points on 8 of 11 shooting from the field with 3 triples. Defensively, Aaron Gordon did a fantastic job guarding Jimmy Butler, limiting the superstar to inefficient numbers. On top of all of this, third option Michael Porter Jr. had a terrible showing in the finals. For many teams, their third star playing so poorly would kill them, but the Nuggets had so many options that it didn't matter. In the end, Game 5 came down to the wire, with the scrappy Heat refusing to give up. But Denver's defense won this fight, with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope getting the steal that will live on in Nuggets history forever. This turnover by Jimmy Butler all but gutted the Heat's momentum, and Denver soon closed it out to win their first championship in franchise history. Nikola Jokic was fittingly named the Finals MVP. Irony at its finest, given the fact that many believe Jokic was robbed of his third straight MVP just a few weeks prior. But Jokic got the MVP that truly mattered, cementing himself as one of the all-time great centers. It wasn't just that Denver won it all, but how easy they made it look. Their run was on par with some of the historically great teams. They went 16-4, never facing elimination, and winning most of their games by double digits. Some scream out that they only played low-ranking seeds in their championship pursuit, but that's why getting the number 1 seed in today's game is so valuable. They played who was in front of them, and they overpowered their opponents. It's all the result of excellent roster construction by Tim Connolly and Calvin Booth, the 2 executives who oversaw this team. The front office rarely whiffed in the draft. They always treated their stars with respect, and made forward-thinking trades that would pay off. They didn't panic when Jamal Murray got hurt. They invested in players who the league had given up on in Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, Monte Morris, Torrey Craig, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. The list goes on and on. At the centerpiece of it all lies a superstar who played the center, a position that was abandoned in the mid-2010s. When Denver committed to Nikola Jokic on that fateful day on December 15, 2016, they were taking a leap of faith. Every other contending team at the time was led by elite guards and wings. Choosing Nikola Jokic, the pudgy 41st pick from Serbia, to be the franchise's savior and leader was a risky move that many felt would blow up in their faces. But their trust and belief paid off, and there is no one player in today's game the Nuggets would rather have leading their franchise. This 2023 team did what so many past other Nuggets contenders couldn't for 56 years prior, and that's finishing the job. For that, these players will be immortalized in Denver Nuggets history forever.